Hello, all my book reading friends. We're here to talk about my April wrap up. Now, if you've seen any of my videos before, you know that I tend to take on a lot of read-a-thons because just one's never enough for me. Sometimes it bites me in the butt. Other times, I sail through it no problem. This was one of those months. I got through everything I wanted to read, which was awesome. So we're going to jump right in. I did the Thankful-a-thon, the Autistic Pride read-a-thon, the Reading Rush, and the Magical read-a-thon, in which I took on the OWLS exams to see how many of those I could complete. So I'll let you know how I did. Did I complete all of the OWLS or just the ones for my career track? You'll find out. First of all, we'll talk about the Thankful-a-thon. I participated in this one a few months ago. It happened. It was a lot of fun. It's pretty low key. The prompts are pretty easy for me to meet, so it wasn't a problem. The first prompt called for you to either read your favorite contemporary or a book out of your favorite genre. I don't read a lot of contemporary right now. I went through a phase where everything was contemporary murder mysteries. That's just not where I am right now. I'm doing a lot more fantasy and sci-fi. So I went with my favorite genre. Crest by Marissa Meyer from the Lunar Chronicles. This is book 3 in the series. I have fallen in love with this series. I originally had relied on my library to take care of me, and this was one of the last books I checked out before COVID-19 locked us all down into our houses with no more, library trips for a while. But I've gone ahead and purchased the first 3 books in the series, so I now own them. A new to me book. This one I read on ebooks. I'll try to remember to pop the picture up there. It's called Black Recluse by Anna Bowman. A very Firefly kind of vibe if you're into that particular TV show or fandom. Post-apocalyptic, one group of people had taken over and decided how the world should be run, whereas Firefly is like the entire galaxy. Black Recluse is a planet. It was amazing. It was a page turner. I absolutely loved it. Not necessarily the type of sci-fi I normally go for, but this very definitely, there's a sequel that I will definitely be digging into. A new to me author. Now, the funny thing is, this author is new to me, but he was not new to my husband, of all things. This was The Nemesis Manifesto by Eric Van Lustbader. I picked this book up, earned this book, won it, whatever, off of Bookish First. And the interesting thing is, this author, I'd never heard of him before, but when my husband saw me reading the book, he went, "Oh, that's the Jason Bourne guy." I went, "Yeah, how did you?" Well, of course, he's read most of the Jason Bourne books. Eric Van Lustbader, when Robert Ludlum passed, his estate came to Eric Van Lustbader and said, "Would you please finish up the Jason Bourne series for us?" So that's sort of that political intrigue genre is sort of his thing. And in this book, honestly, it's not a book I normally would have gone after. But when I realized that the field agent for a black ops arm of the Department of Defense is a woman, this whole thing is a woman kicking butt and taking names, trying to root out this group that calls themselves the Nemesis Manifesto, or who the Nemesis and their manifesto to try to upset some major world powers and screw things up on an international political scope. A favorite audiobook. I don't really have a lot of audiobooks, but this is one that had come pretty highly recommended, and it fit into the Consabor Reading Challenge, which is a year-long thing that I'm doing. Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. It was at first I thought this is a really darling story, a very sweet coming-of-age story, and then nearly about 2/3 of the way through, it takes this right turn and just tears your heart out and becomes this very serious look at how different generations can view the family history and how people from certain countries, certain cultures, Rosa's family is all from Cuba, and how she longs to understand what it means to be Cuban, and her grandmother, who fled Cuba, would rather never talk about it. So how that completely different set of perspectives on this country of origin, how it affects the way that they interact with each other, and how they have completely drastically different ideas as to whether or not it's worthwhile to talk about. Really great story. It's so much more than just a coming of age story. It's about dealing with, Rosa deals with her cultural identity and what does it mean to be a Cuban who's never seen Cuba. And so it's a powerful, powerful story. A book of 500 pages or more. If you've seen my videos at all, you've heard me talk about this series, probably to the point of being tired of it. A Baskerville Affair by Emma Jane Holloway. This is the second book in the series, A Study in Darkness. A Study in Silk was the first one. A Study in Ashes is the third one. I will be reading that one this month. Evelina Cooper is the niece of the one and only Sherlock Holmes, except in this version of London, steam barons call all the shots. They run everything. All of your electricity is steam powered. All of the heat in your home is steam powered. If you piss off the steam baron that owns your particular quadrant of the city, you're just screwed because he'll just cut your steam off. And he can do that because you can't go anywhere else to get help because none of the other steam barons will cross those lines to help you. So everybody lives in their own little region run by their own little steam baron, and there is a plot afoot to try to overthrow them. At the end of book one, Evelina finds herself in a situation where she's sort of indebted to a very wealthy man who wants some dirt on one of the steam barons, so she has to go live in a seedier part of the city to protect her uncle. This man is blackmailing her to get her to do this. So that's where this book starts. We haven't gotten happily ever after for anybody yet, so I'm waiting to see what happens at the end of book 3, because as of right now, there's no happily ever after for anyone. Reading book 3 this month, I'm excited and sort of not, because I love the characters and I love the story, so I really want to see how it ends. I really want to see somebody get their happily ever after, but I don't want to give up all of my book friends. If you've ever been there, you know how I'm feeling. A series, book in a series. I found the series Bookish First again. It's a great website, bookishfirst.com. You go there and you read a synopsis of a book, just a quick little first, they call it a first look, and you give your first impression, which is sort of a little mini pre-review. And then you may get chosen to get a hard copy of the book. Well, I got a hard copy of the first book in this series before I had finished the first book. I had pre-ordered the next 2, which weren't even out yet. I have since ordered book 4, which actually moves on from the main 2 characters to the main male character, to the leading man's best friend. Shark's Edge is the title of the series. This is Shark's Rise, book 3. And again, it's one of those where Abby and Sebastian don't get their happily ever after until the end of this book. He's a very wealthy man, business owner, building a brand new building to house his corporation. She's the caterer that takes care of all of his events. They're around each other a lot. They fall in love. You kind of see it coming, but it takes them a while to get to their happily ever after because people are trying to use her to get to him. His business rivals are using her to threaten him. So book 4 is called Grant's Heat, and it's Sebastian's best friend. Grant, best friend since childhood, and Grant works for him. So Grant shows up in books 4, 5, and 6. The story jumps over to Grant's life, and Sebastian and Abby will become, I believe, kind of like secondary characters. So I'm looking forward to the rest of that series, but technically I've finished Sebastian and Abby's part of the story. Movie or TV adaptation. I pushed an envelope with this one just a little bit because this book itself has not ever been adapted to movie or television, but the story it's based on has. This is a retelling. Disney has come out with this neat little collection. They've actually, I don't know if they've commissioned these authors or they've allowed the authors to do it. There's like 3 names I keep seeing over and over again. Liz Braswell is one that's written quite a few of them, and she wrote Straight On Till Morning. All of these books are retellings of the Disney versions of fairy tales, if that makes sense. So Disney has given it, well, the Disney logo is on the top of the book. I don't know if you can see it right there. So Disney's involved. Disney's copyright is not in any danger. But they all have a what if sort of tagline. So when I read As Old as Time, it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, the what if was, what if Belle's mother was the one who cursed the prince? Concealed Don't Feel is the retelling of Frozen. What if Elsa and Anna grew up not knowing each other? In the movie, the moment when she gets zapped, Anna gets zapped by Elsa's magic, this novel says, what if instead of just wiping Anna's memory of Elsa's magic, they wiped Anna's memory of Elsa and wiped Elsa's memory of Anna and separated them? And that's exactly what happened. This one, Straight On Till Morning, is obviously a retelling of Peter Pan that says, what if Wendy first traveled to Neverland with Captain Hook? In this story, Peter Pan doesn't come back to get his shadow. He leaves it at Wendy's, and she ends up being the only one in her family who still believes in Peter Pan. Michael and John have outgrown the nursery. They've moved on. John is getting ready to go to college. He's in his last year of school, getting ready to go on to university. Wendy has reached that age where girls her age aren't expected to keep going to school, so she doesn't. She stays home and helps her mother take care of the house. But she's determined to prove that Peter Pan and Neverland are real. So she finds a way to let Hook know that she will trade Peter Pan's shadow for a trip to Neverland. Well, of course, Hook is going to play fast and loose with the legalities of that. He's going to try to trick her. In the end, it ends up being Wendy and Tinkerbell who have to save Neverland. Quite frankly, Peter Pan is absent for the majority of the story. It's Wendy and Tinkerbell trying to find him. They find the Lost Boys, but then they have to go do some other things before they. So really, The Lost Boys and Peter Pan are minor characters in this story. It's all about Wendy and Tinkerbell saving the day, figuring out the mysteries, figuring out the cryptic statements to save Neverland from Captain Hook and the pirates. So it's a really great girl power story. Wendy goes back home and starts living this life of a benefactor and a woman who takes care of those in need because she has the resources to do so. It's a great story. If you're looking for strong female characters, this is a book for you. Okay, I'm going to drink real quick because I'm dry throat. On to the last book in the Thankful-a-thon, called for Spring Color on the cover. Can we talk about how stunning? All of the covers are like this, the faces with some sort of really funky artwork. I found this book, again, in the Friends of the Library bookstore. I talk about that place all the time. I was intrigued by the premise, realized it was a trilogy, bought the other 2 books from Thrift Books, found the prequel on Amazon, read that on my Kindle. I believe it's called the New Soul series, if I'm not mistaken. The main character in this book is a woman named Anna, and she's 18 years old, and her mother's kicking her out of the house. And her mother's a horrible person. You hate her mother through the whole story. Prior to Anna being born, every single person born in this community, the capital city is called Heart. Every person born in this community is reincarnated. And they're reincarnated with their memories and their skill sets intact. So at the age of 13, people are moving out to start their careers because they've been reincarnating as the same person over and over, well, the same soul over and over and over again for 1,000 years. So their skills come back to them really quickly. So you're always a carpenter, you're always a seamstress, you're always a wheelwright, you're always a blacksmith, you're always a doctor. But there's a night when the lights go out in the temple goes dark, which never happens, it's always lit. And a baby's born, and when they put her hand to the little plate to test and see which soul she is that's come back, she's not. She's new. She's not a reincarnated soul. Now, her mother raises her in isolation and tells her that because she's a no soul, she doesn't know how to love. She can't have any wants or needs because she has no soul. She meets a young man who says, Bull, you've got a new soul. You definitely can feel love and have wants and needs, and they're all legitimate, and learn to express them, please. So it's interesting to find out how she was born as a new soul, where she came from. Are there going to be more? Who knows? So there are 2 other books in the series. The next one, I believe, is called Asunder. And the artwork is just stunning. All the artwork is beautiful. I did read Phoenix Overture, which was the prequel, which sort of set us up to meet some of the characters from this book before whatever it is that allowed them to keep reincarnating had happened. So I'm intrigued. I love the book. I love the artwork. Jody Meadows has done a beautiful job, I think, with the series. So we'll see what happens as I continue to maneuver my way through the series. So that's the Thankful-a-thon, which took place the entire month of April. Next is the Magical Read-a-thon. This is based on the Harry Potter system of your exams. So these were the owls. Don't ask me what the owls initials stand for. I don't remember. I'm ashamed to say I took part in a read-a-thon based on books I've never read. But you had prompts. Now there were some. You could just read a few for a specific career track because there's another read-a-thon called the Newts. You take your Newts exams later on in the year. That's sort of a continuation of this, the next set of exams. I read them all. I had the time to do it. I finished all the prompts that I wanted to read. So for Ancient Runes, and some of these were ebooks, so I'll try to remember to put the graphics for their covers up here so you can see them. Ancient Runes was a book called Chemistry by C.L. Lynch. This was also a part of the Autistic Pride read-a-thon that I did. Found a lot of really new authors. That read-a-thon, I found some authors that I love and I thought were great, and I found some other books that were kind of a disappointment. So that read-a-thon was kind of all over the place for me. I can never say this word, arithmancy, which is the magical qualities of the number 2. Read something outside your favorite genre. Now, I like science fiction. I don't necessarily like the whole exploring new species kind of science fiction, if that makes any sense at all. The entire book, actually there's 2 books that this author has written, and they both made my read-a-thon, but they're both about trying to set up alliances with new species of people on planets. Not necessarily the niche in sci-fi that I'm a fan of, but I absolutely loved both of her books, and they both ended up in the Owls and in my Autistic Pride read-a-thon. Failure to Communicate by Kaya Sonderby. Her main character is autistic in a time when she was born in a time when they had managed to genetically manipulate all those kinds of things out of the human population. Some people decided to have their children naturally without the genetic manipulation, and a group of people were born who have autism. And the world, civilization, the galaxy doesn't really know what to do with them. But in this particular book, our main character is valued by the ship that she's working with, and um, she'll talk about what she's supposed to be like based on the literature that she's read, but she's not at all the stereotype. Um, I believe that book has multiple POV, so there is some um, there's some shifts in perspective, which is great. Tone of voice I read for defense against cannot talk tonight the dark arts, which was a book set at sea. This is an entire planet. They go to see the voices and hands. Now we would call them whales and squids, whales and octopi, but they're sentient. They can talk. They can communicate. And they live in a symbiotic type relationship. The hands, which are the animals that we would see as squids, live on, like they ride the voices, we would call them whales, and they communicate in some form of sign language that the whales can understand. So the whales actually literally have to be the voices for the squids, but when you're riding, like they will let this team that comes to try to set up an alliance with them to try to get them to join the alliance, um, they get permission to ride, but it's the squids that have to help hold them on when these whales are flying through the water. So I loved everything about Kaya Sonderby's writing. I absolutely adore the characters. In tone of voice, she has a non-binary character. And rather than using what we would use as they, them pronouns, this particular character uses completely different ones. And I've been told that they get used other places as well. I've never seen them before this book. But rather than he or she, it was, I didn't know how to pronounce it for sure. In my head, it was VI, and then instead of her or him or them, it was Vir, VIR. So she had a completely non-binary character. The main character, it gives you reason to believe that she might be bisexual because she shows romantic interest in two different individuals, one of whom is a girl, one of whom is a boy. Um, Maybe even some polyamorous hints from a couple of different groups. So representation is all over the place in that book. History of Magic. This was to be a book that had witches or wizards. Again, told you this book would show up more than once. A Study in Darkness, because one of the people she's dealing with and trying to figure out exactly who he is and who he's working for is a wizard. Transfiguration. This is a book. Where'd it go? This is a book that includes shapeshifting. This is Misguided Confession by Dahlia Donovan, also on the Autistic Pride Read-a-thon. Yeah, shapeshifters were a thing. It's a nice little story. I enjoyed it a lot. Fairly predictable story, but again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's only so many books I could read like this that leave me hanging for happily ever after. I need to eventually go find a book that will give me some warm fuzzies. That took care of everything I needed for the career track I wanted to pursue with owls. So the rest of these were just for fun. Divination. This needed to be a book that was randomly generated. I went online and I counted all the books on my bookshelf that I hadn't read. Went to a random number generator and I said to pick a number, and then I counted starting at the top and landed on this book, Theonite by M.L. Wang. It is fantastic. I loved it. I loved everything about it. This girl named Joan can call up fire. She can levitate objects, and she doesn't understand why nobody else ever does this. She can, so certainly other people can too. But when others see what she can do, they freak out. So she learns very quickly she has to keep it to herself. She meets a boy named Daniel who transfers to her school, and she discovers purely by accident he's got some of the powers that she's got. So this whole new alternate possibility opens up to her. The interesting thing is this book kind of left you hanging, and there's a sequel that I'm dying to get my hands on. I loved it. I won this book as a part of the In December reading challenge, review challenge, the prize package that came from Megan Tennant. This was one of the books. I think I have a couple of titles maybe by this author. I loved this book. I loved everything about it. the idea that a girl with superpowers is living in the world and doesn't realize that her powers are something that nobody else has and can't figure out why everybody looks at her so weird. It's a really good read. I can't wait to get my hands on the sequel. Herbology. This is a book that involves, oh, the title needed to start with an I. Incarnate. That one covered. We already talked about that one. I'm going to be talking about it again because I loved it. Astronomy. This was one that you read mostly at night. Now, I just wanted to get this book read. I've read like the abridged versions. Like, you know how you can buy classic books for kids at the sort of a watered down abridged version to make it a little more approachable? That was the only version of this particular book I'd ever read. And I wanted to read the full thing translated because I don't read French. So, and I read this at night. I paced myself. It took me 23 days, I think, because it's so long. The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, 700 pages, so it was a bit of a read. And I only just learned last month that Alexandre Dumas was biracial. How did I not know that? I was an English minor in college. I really should have known that. Shamefully, I did not until I read this. He was born in 1802, grandson of a French nobleman and an Afro-Caribbean slave. So his grandmother was a slave. I had no clue. So, typical French literature. It's a great story. No movie or series that you've ever seen comes close to the book. But and I've been told this is typical because there's a lot of everything is very, very flowery. And if an emotion is worth feeling, it's worth talking about for 4 pages. And I've been told that that's typical of the French writers of this time. And I got through it and I enjoyed it. And I just don't know that I would ever try to read it again because it was 700 pages of really flowery prose. Charms. This is a book that had a white cover, and so I figured this was mostly white, right? Nemesis Manifesto, mostly white. So we went with that one for the white cover. Muggle Studies. This was a book from a perspective of a contemporary, a Muggle. This was another one that made it onto my Autistic Pride read-a-thon. Loved it. It's called A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert. It's the sweetest story of a young lady who is on the autism spectrum, autism Asperger spectrum, and this guy moves in next door who's just fascinated by her, and he doesn't see her quirks as a problem, and he just will not give up, and just very gently and delicately and carefully letting her set all of the parameters and standards, pursues her. And it's one of the sweetest love stories I've ever read, because rather than the guy being, I'm determined to prove myself to her, he learns to read her and learns to let her set the pace for all of their conversations and interactions and everything, and doesn't try to fix her. He just loves her as she is, and I loved that about that book. Potions. This is a book under 150 pages. So this was where I read Phoenix Overture, which is the prequel to Incarnate, which I also read. I lied. I didn't get all the owls read. The only one I didn't get read was Care of Magical Creatures, which called for you to read a book with an animal on the cover, and I just didn't have one to read. So that's the only thing I didn't get done, but I think I'm okay. I think I'm happy with that. For the reading rush, I've already mentioned the 2 books I read for that. This was just a weekend-long deal. There were 4 prompts. There was also a video that you could do where you talked about how your reading was going. You gave a shout out to some of your favorite book personalities, creators, whether they were booktubers or authors or whatever. I managed to cover all 4 of the prompts in just 2 books. House on the cover, Black Recluse by Anna Bowman has a house on the cover. I used that one. And a book that I read in the same room that was set in a dream location and makes me smile. I used this one. I got a chance to go to London last summer and loved it. I'd love to go back. This book is set in London. It makes me smile simply because that snarky, sarcastic approach that Sherlock always takes, Evelina has sort of inherited that a little bit. So she's got some of that snark and sarcasm that makes me giggle occasionally, even in the midst of a story that's really intense. And I tend to sit in my office and read, so I read it in the same room the entire time. So that one took care of the reading rush. That was the 16th to the 19th of April, quick little read-a-thon. Now we're on to the Autistic Pride read-a-thon, and this one was fun because all of the authors in this particular, in this read-a-thon, the goal was to have everything you read be from autistic authors, which I thought was awesome. I'm trying to stretch my own diversity as far as the author base that I read from because, quite frankly, I needed to do that. So I'm trying to stretch myself into all sorts of different identity groups. So it was a 3x3 little 9 square bingo card. Starting at the top, going across, Own Voices Wrap. I read Mothman by Kaylin Rywall. Some shifter storyline in there too. Sci-fi fantasy. This was Tone of Voice by Kaya Sonderby, which again, loved her books. I absolutely am a fan. Um, the romance book that I read was The Misguided Confession by Dahlia Donovan. Again, sweet little love story. The indie or self-published book was Ashby Holler by Jamie Zakian. Not my cup of tea. I said that to somebody and I explained the book and they're like, well, you just don't like motorcycle romances. Well, I love motorcycle club romances. This did not. Had the motorcycle club vibe. It did not have the romance vibe. And I struggled, and it probably was just to me, I struggled with the storyline. I felt like I missed things somewhere in the storyline and had to go back and keep rereading things to stay current. Um, Not my favorite read. It still was a good story. It just wasn't necessarily something I would go back and read again. A queer author and queer rep, Failure to Communicate, fills both of those. Kaya Sonderby is a member of the LGBTQ community. And like I said, that's the book that has a non-binary person in it. No, I lied. That's Tone of Voice. Failure to Communicate has some genderqueer characters in it. So, no autistic rep whatsoever. That's the book Chemistry. Great little book about a girl who just clicks with a guy and can't figure out why she clicks with him. But it's a good story by C.L. Lynch. Definitely an author I will be looking into and following up with again. Short story novella, No Room at the Inn by Brooke Winters. Real short, easy romance read. Nothing splashy or unusual about it. But again, sometimes you just need that really nice, predictable romance palette cleanser to get you through. A contemporary. I loved this book. I did it as an audiobook, Queens of Geek by Jen Wild. I absolutely loved everything about this. Again, I don't normally do audiobooks. I have a hard time staying in the moment if I'm listening to a book. This one worked. The narrator's voice, the characters, two of the three main characters, well, really the two girls whose perspective it's told from, are from Australia. They have a friend who travels with them, who comes with them from Australia, but he was originally born and raised in the US. They come back to SuperCon because one of the girls, her YouTube personality earned her a role in a movie, and the movie is being promoted at this fan convention. So they show up at SuperCon, and the girl named Taylor has, she's on the spectrum, and she has social anxiety. And so she's going to this really huge gathering of a lot of people with a social anxiety disorder. So it's great to watch her overcome a lot of her stuff and step out of her comfort zone. And it's great to watch the people around her cheer her on, like, you are doing amazing things. Um, like I said, I listened to it as an audiobook, but I absolutely loved the story from top to bottom, from start to finish. It was a great book. Um, and an author of color on the Autistic Pride Read-a-thon. Again, A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert. Again, Talia Hibbert's another one of those authors that's now on my radar. I've been shopping around and looking at her other books and added them all to my want to read my wish list. So, yeah, definitely. So I had a pretty good month as far as reading series that I already knew I loved or finding series. I did love finding some new authors I absolutely adore. Um, I kind of did this backwards, like my May readathons video is already up, so we're doing the April wrap up after I've already done my TBRs for May. But I'd love to hear from you what you're reading, what your favorite reads in April were, what your least favorite reads were, what your 5 stars were, what books you wish you had never picked up. Talk to you soon.